Um, Hello everyone, my name is Anup, Sathya. Thanks for coming to my talk. I'm really excited to talk about our paper Attention Nooks, which I worked on in collaboration with my professor Dr. Ken Nakaraki at the University of Chicago. When the internet first arrived into the home, the act of accessing information on it meant sitting down at a desk, waiting for everything to load, and then you get a couple of bytes of information. And once you're done, you had to physically move away from the computer. But today we can carry a small device literally everywhere we go, and this has immense amount of benefits, right? When I'm trying to figure out how to get to the convention center, I can figure out the route, find out when the next tram is, also pay with my phone, and this is kind of like a superpower. But this superpower comes with downsides. Because you can carry this tiny device everywhere, every moment in every space is an opportunity for some form of content consumption that keeps you hooked. And this affects how we sleep, it affects how we socialize, and it changes the fabric of home in ways that are really hard to combat. So when we try to think about setting some boundaries around device usage, the instinct is to block things, is to set time limits or frequency limits. But doesn't fully consider how habits are formed. Habits are automatic behavioral responses to environmental cues. And what that means is that if I have a bag of chips on my desk, I'm probably going to eat it. But unlike a bag of chips which has like questionable value for me, modern devices are actually really useful, so we can't get rid of them entirely. So let's say that I have an intention to read more when I'm on the couch. I have a couple of books here to remind me, but when I sit down with my laptop and there's something interesting to watch on YouTube, I forget about this intention. But instead of continuing to get sucked into Barcelona, Spain, walking toward 4K, what if there was a sensor on the wall that detected that I'm in this space and just reduce the brightness of my device to remind me of my intentions, so that I can put my laptop away and pick up my book? We call these attention nooks. So different spaces in the home are designed for different activities. But when we carry a device across these spaces, these boundaries are blurred and they get eventually broken. So our motivation behind this work is to try and renegotiate technological boundaries in the home in a way that aligns with how we form different habits in different spaces. And in order to do this, we use an autobiographical design method. Autobiographical design is when the researcher builds the system, uses it themselves, learns about the design space, and evaluates and iterates the design based on their own experiences. Although autobiographical design can't provide generalizable findings like a large RCT or something like that, it's especially useful in our case because indoor localization can be quite noisy and imperfect, which would be annoying for real users. Digital well-being is a dynamic construct, and so what it means to be well is constantly evolving. And it requires access to a lot of extremely personal data about what I use where in the house. But most importantly, it allows for constant tinkering of the system and the intervention over time. In our paper, we talk a lot more about the tensions with autobiographical design and some of the more deeper insights we found. But in this talk, I want to talk about how my apartment and my habits evolved over the time I was living with these attention nooks. So this is a simplified recreation of my apartment. And so before I started deploying these nooks in my home, I had this horrible habit of staying up until 3 a.m. watching things on YouTube in bed. So the first nook that I set up was to avoid all device usage in bed. And then eventually, because I couldn't stay in bed, this shifted to the couch, where I would watch stuff really late and fall asleep.
Get rid of the couch.
And now that I couldn't use my devices in bed or the couch, I would sit at my desk for long periods and spend time on YouTube or Reddit. But this is also where I work, so I can't avoid all device usage in this space. So just at my desk, I set up a nook to block YouTube and Reddit. I could still use my laptop in the kitchen when I was cooking to look up recipes, or if I really wanted to use Reddit, I could walk away from the desk. But I couldn't use it at the desk to watch YouTube or Reddit. And this worked well for a bit, but after a few weeks, if you see this tiny corner here, I started watching YouTube in that tiny corner. And my initial intention was to read books in this space, and sometimes I read digital books and not just physical books. So I designed Nook here just to allow the books app but block everything else. This is a couple of weeks boiled down into a single slide. But what's interesting is that even though I've moved things around in my apartment, some of these habits are still stuck. I don't use devices in bed anymore, and when I'm at the desk, I instinctively don't do anything but work. And this might seem like a small thing, but in the bigger picture, this has quite, I think, a positive impact on my life in like many tacit ways that I don't know if like a metric can capture. So by setting up these different nooks in the home, I was able to segment these different spaces into different modes of attention. So when a space is liberated from device usage, it allows my default mode network to operate, and it lets my mind wander. And in spaces where I need to explore a lot of information from different sources, but I need to maintain an internal thread of attention based on the task that I'm working on, I can block just a few things. And in spaces where I want to focus on just a single thing like reading or arranging music, I can block pretty much everything but just that one thing. Along the way, we also designed a really simple way to build and set up these sensors around the home in this tiny canvas that signifies what the space is meant for. And we also explored how a signifier, like a Buddha statue, could transform how we think of a space, not just spiritually, but also actually affect how we use our devices in these spaces. So this also came with a simple architecture for a single dweller household using millimeter wave radar, which is a new experimental technology, and open source home automation solutions like Home Assistant, so that all the private data can stay within the home without having to go to the cloud or something like that. There's still a lot of work to be done in terms of multi-dweller households before this can be deployed in real homes. There are some promising directions which use technologies like ultra-wideband that's used in Apple AirTags. The downsides of being constantly connected are felt most in the home, where regular ordinary life gets overlooked. And when we want to try and break free, we tend to rely on crude metrics like time and frequency that don't capture the richness of everyday life. So a question that I want to continue to ask is, apart from building device-centric interventions that rely on the device's knowledge of how it's being used, how can we account for the richness of everyday life when we design interventions for digital well-being? This paper is one part of the various ways in which I'm trying to explore this question. I want to thank the members of my lab for their feedback, and also Professor Kyle Lukoff and Scott Jensen for their amazing work.